Welcome back, everyone, to the fastest 20 minutes in sports presented by Betting by the Numbers. We are back after an awesome weekend in sports with everything from the rugby field to the golf course to the racetrack being exciting. We had an awesome UFC event, WWE Elimination Chamber, and we're here to recap everything. We're going to quickly go through a set of 6 topics today. We're going to start with rugby, head on over to NASCAR, quickly dip into the soccer leagues, over to golf, and then we will round out with MLB and our best bets for today. We had another 1-1 week with our picks on Thursday. Just can't seem to get that 2-0 split. Lots of good looks, just some unfortunate finishes. So we're going to go through all of that. As we talked about in our previous episodes, if we're going through these sports that you might have a little less familiarity with, and you just want to understand something a little bit better, maybe you watch rugby for the first time this weekend or will with the Sevens tournament coming up this weekend, and you are like, what is going on here? I am happy to explain those things, even if it's something I don't quite understand myself. I'm happy to go through it, figure out a kind of a common man's understanding to some of these explanations, and then try to explain it to you all. So leave comments, leave questions, leave likes, subscribe. Let's do all those things and keep this growing because I think we got something here. I think that we have a lot of potential and we need to keep growing on it. So let's head on over to the rugby field. We mentioned this in both our episodes last week, but we had some huge games going on in the Six Nations tournament, which again is pitting together Europe's best rugby teams. It typically consists of the top 3 being some selection of Ireland, England and Wales, and Scotland. I guess you want to say top 4, with Italy and France rounding out probably the bottom 2 historically. But that's not always true. Some teams are really good. It's ebbs and flows. It's international like it's soccer. And what I mean by that is these players, almost all of them, have full-time professional careers with teams in Europe, with teams in Australia and New Zealand, where there's a lot of pro leagues. And then they come and they go on international duty, the same way they do with soccer. It's just a little different in rugby because the Six Nations is annual and is, I guess 12 weeks, I think, because there's 5 games and they spread them out over a couple of weeks. I can't remember exactly how many weeks. But either way, it's a big tournament, and we had some big games over the weekend. We started off with Ireland putting a beat down on Wales. Ireland are in the driver's seat right now. They're first place with 15 points collected, which means they've gone 3-0 in their wins. They've also got the bonus points for scoring a certain amount of tries or touchdowns if you have the equivalent in football, putting the ball in the end zone. And so they've really looked dominant. It's their trophy to probably lose at this point, but they have a matchup with Scotland, who looked great this weekend as well. I asked some people, hey, you should watch this game. If you've never watched rugby before, turn on Peacock, watch Scotland and England. And if you did, it was awesome. Game ended 30-21 with Scotland getting the win. Vandermeer for Scotland scored a hat trick of tries, and Finn Russell played absolutely insane. He had this kick it was a kick pass down the sideline. He kind of hit it off the outside of his foot, his right foot, and it went down the field. It was picked up perfectly by Vandermeer, and it was a weird game. England comes into Scotland Stadium, and at the first couple minutes looked, I guess to say first 20 minutes looked like the better team. Suddenly, Scotland kind of gets a score out of play or against the run of play, and it was off to the races. So Scotland picks up a huge result against their rival and is looking to possibly put themselves in contention to win if they can get results in the last 2 games. Finally, France and Italy tied 13. Italy misses a penalty kick after the ball fell off the tee, and the kick was rushed because the kicker had to then go up, put the ball back on the tee. And with the shot clock that was instituted in 2023, they had to get that going. He rushes the kick, it hits the post, and unfortunately, the game ends in a tie. Italy had a really good chance to win that game and kind of turn the tide of their country in rugby even more. They've really improved over the last couple of years and started to put closer and closer results, but they need to start winning some games to really turn that edge. So interesting next couple of weeks. Like I said, Ireland and Scotland will finish out in week 5 against each other. So, it's really all to play for if Ireland trips up at all. But I do think it's Ireland's trophy to lose at this point. And it'll be interesting. So last couple of weeks coming up, I'll be sure to talk about them more as the games come and we preview them. But just a great weekend of rugby. So let's head on over to the track now. In NASCAR, we had the Better Health 400 at Atlanta Motor Speedway that ended in one of the wildest finishes in NASCAR recent history, at least, with Daniel Suarez eking out a victory over Ryan Blaney and Kyle Busch. You'll see the picture here, but all three drivers pretty much side by side going into the last lap. Daniel Suarez is in the middle and kind of bouncing between the two as they turned into the last corner. You can see it was extremely close. The NASCAR timing came out and said that Suarez beat Blaney by 0.003 seconds, and Kyle Busch was 0.007 seconds behind the race winner. So just an insane race. The race had 48 lead changes between 14 drivers. And honestly, it started out crazy. Second lap, there's a wreck that took out, I think, like 16 people. Some of them were able to get back in the race, but lots of repairs. And it was just a really interesting race. There was, I think, 10 or 12 cautions. Just in a time where Formula One's still getting ready to start this weekend, NASCAR showed itself, look, in a world where Formula One has a lot of not close races, we are a motorsport that can put together dramatic and important moments that maybe Formula One can't provide right now because of how big the disparity gap between Red Bull and the other teams are. So if you aren't watching NASCAR and you're someone who's just trying to get into it, maybe it's not something you need to sit down and watch a full 4-hour race. But go on YouTube and watch the highlights. Just watch 10 minutes of it, get a feel for it. And once you start learning the personalities, it's like a lot of those solo sports. It's the same as golf. It's the same as tennis. Once you start learning the personalities of the people behind the sport, it becomes much more interesting. Netflix just had a documentary that came out a couple months ago that was the same kind of drive to survive style as Formula One. And it does that great lesson of just showing that a lot of these race car drivers, while they're phenomenal athletes, they are also just normal dudes. So it's a lot of fun. And it's guys who are a little more willing to put some risks in front of them and try to do crazy things, as you can kind of see in this race. So we will be going on. Like I said, we're going to have the Formula One season starting this weekend. We'll get a full preview of that on Thursday because it'll be a full race week. But it's time for NASCAR to keep stepping up, keep putting a product forward, and they keep doing so with two great races to start the season. Let's head on over to soccer. In the Leagues Cup, we had Liverpool beat Chelsea in extra time, 1-0 to win the Carabao Cup, as it's known now with the sponsors. What this is, for those who don't follow English soccer as well, you have your normal Premier League or your Championship league that are your top two leagues of teams in England. You can be promoted, you can be demoted between them, but they are like the main structural leagues that are played in week in and week out. In addition to those leagues, if you wouldn't believe it, soccer organizations have wanted to try to create as much revenue as possible by making as many games as possible. In England, they started with the FA Cup, which is a tournament where teams all the way through, I believe, the 7th or 8th division get to start playing. And it's truly a competition of all soccer teams in England trying to find the best one of them all. The Carabao Cup is a little bit different. It came around, I want to say it was 20-something years ago. It was created as sort of a tournament that would go on during the season, but it wouldn't interfere as much with the Premier League's schedule. It was determined to be somewhat of a midweek trophy where teams played on Wednesday nights, Thursday nights, and it was kind of in off weeks to just get additional games, get additional nighttime games that can be prime time in the country. And while it's maybe not the most important trophy in the country, it's certainly a trophy that you can win. For Manchester City, they've won, I believe, 5 of the last 6 years. So it's kind of been a dominance by one team. Liverpool gets into the final this year against Chelsea. They have pretty much their whole team hurt. They're missing probably 7 or 8 of their starters. Chelsea puts mostly their starting squad on the field, and for the first 90 minutes, pretty boring. There's one score by Virgil van Dijk for Liverpool in the first 90 minutes, gets overturned by VAR on a pretty controversial opinion. For those who don't watch soccer as much, the VAR is just the instant replay. Referees can look at decisions and decide if they are, after looking at it the same way they do in football or any other sport, they can decide to overturn calls. That's what happened here. They determined no goals. So game goes on. They go to overtime. Overtime for these sort of soccer tournaments is usually 2 15-minute halves. It is not sudden death. You play those 2 15-minute halves. If the score is still tied after those 2 15-minute halves of extra time, it then goes into penalty kicks. But 30 minutes of extra time, first half of extra time, not a lot of momentum for either team, and then kind of against the run of play. Liverpool gets a corner, and Virgil van Dijk rectifies the situation, scores the game winner, and wins 1-0. So Liverpool have the early trophy. It's the first one that gets crowned every year in late February. So lots to play for in the league, lots to play for in the FA Cup. So a lot of soccer to still be played, but one of those trophies is now wrapped up. So there you go. Premier League, a lot quicker run through. Man U lose a shocker 2-1 to Fulham with a late goal. I think it was in the 90-something, 95th minute by Fulham. Manchester United just cannot right the ship. Even if they get a couple weeks where they might look good, they lose 1 to Fulham, and it all kind of regresses. Arsenal, they put honestly a beat down on Newcastle, 4-1 over the weekend. Newcastle still struggling with a lot of injuries, not exactly the team that they started the season with, but still expect to get better results than that. Arsenal continues to look pretty dominant, especially with their Champions League results. They are eyeing some prizes this year. The question is, can they finish? That was the issue last year. They kind of gave the title to Manchester City, and the question is if they will do that again or they keep getting results. And finally, the other team challenging for the title, Man City, just continues to scrape by. They get another 1-0 win, nothing pretty, but win's a win, 3 points in the column. So you can see here we have the standings for the Premier League. It's going to be a tight couple weeks. We've talked about that in previous videos, but 12 game weeks to go means 12 games for each team, and it's all left to be decided. So should be interesting. I'll keep you all updated on those wins and losses and kind of the teams to watch. So it'll be a fun couple months to finish out the season. And finally, as one season finishes for the Premier League or turns that direction, the MLS just gets started. We have our first full weekend. Miami gets 1 win and 1 draw. Messi scores in the Sunday night primetime game. LAFC picks up a 2-1 win over the Seattle team. That was pretty, I wouldn't say shocking, but those are two teams expected to contend in the West, and LAFC gets the best of them. Portland puts up a 4-1 win over Colorado. And really the rest of the weekend were ties. A lot of ties, a lot of 0-0, 1-1. St. Louis, Sporting Kansas City, both getting ties. Just a lot of cagey soccer, like I talked about in previous episodes. Trying to get those wins or at least ties, results early in the season is very important with how long the season gets. So you'll expect to see teams maybe not going out there trying to score 9 goals, just trying to get results, get a 1-1 draw, a 1-0 win, and kind of grow into who they are as a team. So don't expect a lot of high-scoring, flying games in the MLS until these teams kind of figure out who they are. But Messi, once again, looks like the man that the world has been expecting to see for the last 20 years, and he keeps doing it. So it's must-see television, and it's a good way to kind of consume some MLS while being able to see some of the names that you've seen before. We're going to head on over to golf now. We got 2 stories over in the golf world. We'll first start on the PGA Tour. We had the Mexico Open this last weekend that we talked about, and rookie Jake Knapp gets a lead and gets a win in just his 5th start of his rookie season. He honestly didn't play great. He didn't hit a fairway until the 8th hole of his final round and only found 2 fairways the entire round. But just his scrambling, his putting, he did just enough. He twice allowed Sami Välimäki, I believe is how you say it, from Finland to catch up to him, but never lost the lead, was able to just kind of do enough to earn himself not only some more tournaments this season, but earn himself a trip to the Masters with a few weeks to go. So huge win for Jake Knapp. He becomes now another rookie to get a win this season. And we turn ourselves next week to what used to be called the Honda Classic, is now the Cognizant Classic. But it is down in Florida, and we're going to be having an awesome week. Rory McIlroy leads as the heavy favorite, as the returning champion. But, with playing at PGA National, which is a very well-known course down in Florida, and this is part of the kind of preparation for the Masters. You got to be good with your wedges and your short irons, and you got to putt well on Bermuda grass. And that's something that a lot of players either are good at or bad at. It's just a weird type of grass to putt on, and people either do well or don't do well at it. So it should be super interesting. But yeah, Rory McIlroy starts out with the heavy favorite to repeat this weekend, but we got a lot of big names back in the lineup. And like I said, with the lead up to the Masters, they're going to be pretty pumped up to try to get some good golf on camera and get themselves moving in the right direction. So you usually see the big name guys start to head back for these tournaments and get ready for really one of the biggest, if not the biggest, golf tournament of the year. So now let's head over to LIV. And in Live, the big story, Anthony Kim makes his return to professional golf for the first time in 12 years and is playing in Liv's golf event in Jeddah, Saudi Arabia this weekend as a wild card. Greg Norman put out a video kind of teasing that Anthony Kim would be coming back, and it's kind of a big news. He's someone who's now 38. He was once one of golf's biggest rising stars. He won 2 PGA Tour events pretty quickly and made a Ryder Cup at the age of 23. But just unfortunately never was able to put it together long term. He had some injuries, and he kind of stepped away from golf at 26 and hasn't returned. So 12-year gap. There's been some stories about whether or not he's kind of just been living on some insurance policies that kept him kind of able to have a nice life and not need to play golf. I can't fault the man for it, but seems like the Live Golf money should have done some talking and said, hey, come back. You're a big name. You could be. Who knows if he's going to be great? I assume that, you don't lose all of that ability that quickly. Hopefully the injuries have cleaned up. He used some of that money to help get his body right. But should be an interesting story. Obviously, it's another way that the Live just keeps trying to put on a better show than the PGA Tour. They are exciting, and I think it's a new opportunity for golfers to make some money that doesn't involve maybe a 30, 40-week commitment of the year. So I got no problem with it. Should be exciting. I'll keep you updated on how he does and how the rest of the field does. We'll get into some previews of those tournaments on Thursday. Finally, we're going to head over to MLB before our best bets. MLB opening day is set for March 28th, so a little over a month, and we have spring training rolling. I just want to quickly look at the odds to win the World Series, just to give you an idea of who the books at least are putting at favorite odds. I think it's going to be an interesting year. I mean, Dodgers, it's their championship to lose based on lineup alone, but we've learned a lot in baseball. It's not purely lineup alone. So a lot of teams there, you can kind of see a grouping of 6 or 7 teams all with the ability to contend for a title. So we'll get into some specific kind of conference breakdowns maybe, or rather division breakdowns for baseball as we get closer to opening day. Still some lineups that need to get set, some players who haven't been signed in free agency, so we don't know exactly what these lineups look like. If there's any big value that pops up, maybe some numbers don't change, I'll be sure to tweet out or include that information in further episodes. So be listening in. You can also see we have our win totals for the teams in the AL and the NL. Again, this is just to give some preliminary just preview of the season, kind of where the books are at on these teams, and which teams are likely going to not have great showings based on their win totals. Obviously, not all of these are going to be perfectly accurate, but they're not usually far off. So should be an interesting season. Again, we'll dive into this with a little bit more of specificity in future episodes. But I just wanted to kind of get that on your all's plates and say, look, we got baseball coming. Get ready. And if you are someone who likes to put some futures down, we'll be talking about that. But just a quick value glance. So let's head on over for our last segment of the day, the best bets. I hate this team, but you'd be losing a lot of money if you weren't betting for them to win at home and to cover, and that is the KU Jayhawks. They're minus 6.5 at home as the time is recording against a BYU team who has got a lot of impressive results at home. Under the KinPom metrics, you can see they're not bad at a lot of things. However, they're 1-7 against the spread on the road. Now, they've gotten some wins in those games, but in some they've been favorites and just haven't covered. In others, they've been underdogs and have gotten blown out. You can decide if it's the refs, the crowds, some illegal combination of the two, but you just don't get rich betting against the Jayhawks at home. They just beat Texas by 19 over the weekend, and BYU just lost to Kansas State this last weekend on the road, and Kansas State is a much different environment than even KU. So going with the Jayhawks to cover here. Additionally, we're going to head over to the SEC for our other pick, Kentucky plus 3.5 against Mississippi State. Kentucky lost a shocker 75-74 last week against LSU on an insane play. Bounced back this weekend against Alabama, beat them by 22 at home, putting up 117 points. Mississippi State has won 5 in a row, but you can see their metrics. Not a lot of good stuff here. They have the worst free throw and time turnover percentage in the SEC play, and they can really only score in the paint. If Kentucky gets to a lead early, I see this getting out of hand, and I just don't think Mississippi State has enough here. So those are my two picks, KU minus 6.5, Kentucky plus 3.5, and that's going to do it for our fastest 20 minutes in sports. As I said, like, subscribe, ask any questions you have, and I really appreciate you all watching. If you have any friends who are just trying to find new sports or new information to learn, send it to them, and I am happy to talk about new topics if anything's not being covered. So thanks again for listening.